In the heart of Amish country, where simple living and faith guide every aspect of life, there exist tales whispered around hearths and over barn-raising dinners. These stories, passed down through generations, speak of the supernatural and the unexplained, dark forces that sometimes cross the boundary into our world. The following 12 tales recount encounters with witchcraft and malevolent spirits that have shaken even the most steadfast souls among the Amish. Listen on, if you dare, and discover the eerie events that lurk in the quiet corners of these tranquil communities. The Cursed Barn. Eli Yoder was a respected farmer in the Amish community of Lancaster County. His barns were always filled with the best hay, and his animals were the healthiest. But one autumn evening, things began to change. It started with strange noises. Eli would hear whispers in the barn, voices that seemed to come from the shadows. He dismissed it as either the wind or the animals, but the whispers grew louder each night. Then the cows stopped giving milk, and the chickens laid eggs with blood inside them. One night, Eli decided to stay in the barn to uncover the source of the disturbances. As the moon rose high, the whispers began again, but this time they were accompanied by the sound of footsteps. Eli gripped his lantern tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged, a woman dressed in old tattered clothing, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You've taken what was mine," she hissed, her voice echoing unnaturally. "Now you'll pay the price." The woman raised her hand, and Eli felt an icy grip around his throat. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Just as he thought he would pass out, the woman vanished, and the barn fell silent. The next morning, Eli's body was found lifeless in the barn, his eyes wide open in terror. The community was puzzled and frightened. They buried Eli, but the curse remained. The barn stood empty, and no one dared to go near it. To this day, the whispers can still be heard at night, a chilling reminder of the witch's curse. The Witch's Doll. Hannah Fisher was a talented seamstress known among the Amish for her beautiful handmade dolls. One day, she found an old, strange-looking doll at a local market. Despite its worn appearance, she felt an inexplicable urge to buy it. Hannah brought the doll home and placed it on a shelf in her sewing room. That night, she had a terrible nightmare. She dreamed of a woman with long, dark hair and piercing eyes, who stood over her bed, whispering curses. When Hannah woke up, she found the doll lying beside her, though she clearly remembered placing it on the shelf. Disturbed, she put the doll back and locked the sewing room door. But every night, the same nightmare returned, and every morning, the doll was found in different places around the house. Hannah confided in her friend Mary, who suggested they burn the doll to break the curse. They built a fire in the yard and threw the doll into the flames. As it burned, they heard an unearthly scream, and the air was filled with the smell of sulfur. That night, Hannah slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, but Mary, she was not as fortunate. She woke to find the charred remains of the doll on her pillow, and the same terrifying woman from Hannah's dreams standing at the foot of her bed. Mary tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman leaned in close, her breath icy on Mary's face. "You cannot destroy what you do not understand," she whispered. "Now you will suffer." The next morning, Mary was found in her bed, her hair turned completely white overnight, her eyes devoid of life. The doll was never seen again, but the tale of its curse spread throughout the Amish community, a warning to those who might meddle with dark forces beyond their understanding. The Phantom Weaver. Sarah Miller was known for her exquisite quilts, woven with intricate patterns and vibrant colors. Her skill was unmatched even among the Amish, and people from neighboring towns would travel to purchase her work. One winter, she received a visit from a strange woman who asked her to create a special quilt. The woman, pale and cold, handed Sarah a bundle of unusual black and red threads. "Weave this into a quilt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It must be finished by the next full moon." Sarah, though uneasy, accepted the task. She began working on the quilt, but as she did, She noticed odd things happening around her home. The temperature would drop suddenly, and she would hear faint, sorrowful cries coming from nowhere. Her loom would move on its own, and the threads seemed to weave themselves into disturbing patterns. Then one night, as the full moon approached, Sarah worked late into the evening. She became aware of a presence in the room. Turning, she saw the strange woman standing in the corner, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You are almost finished," the woman said, stepping closer. "Complete the quilt, and your debt will be paid." Sarah's hands moved with a will of their own, completing the quilt in a frenzy. As she tied the last knot, the woman let out a chilling laugh and vanished into thin air. Exhausted, Sarah fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke, the quilt was gone, and her house felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. But the relief was short-lived. The next morning, news spread of a terrible tragedy. The strange woman's house had burned to the ground, and her charred remains were found clutching Sarah's quilt. From that day on, Sarah was haunted by the woman's ghost. Every night she would hear the phantom laughter, and her dreams were filled with fire and screams. The beautiful quilts she once made turned dark and twisted, and her once thriving business fell into ruin. Sarah lived the rest of her days in fear, a reminder of the price one pays for dealing with dark forces. The Witch's Broom. Jacob King was a humble carpenter, known for his skill with wood and his simple, honest Amish life. One day, while chopping wood in the forest, he stumbled upon an old, gnarled broomstick. It looked ancient, almost as if it had grown from the earth itself. Curious, he took it home, thinking it might make an interesting piece for his collection. That night, the broom seemed to come alive. It moved on its own, sweeping the floor with an unnatural speed and precision. Jacob watched in amazement, but his wonder soon turned to horror as the broom began to carve strange symbols into the wooden floor. Panicked, Jacob tried to stop the broom, but the broom was too strong. It knocked him back, continuing its eerie work until the floor was covered in these unsettling markings. Suddenly, a fierce wind blew through the house, extinguishing the lanterns and plunging the room into darkness. The next morning, Jacob found himself alone, the symbols glowing faintly in the early light. He sought help from the town's elders, who recognized the markings as ancient runes used in witchcraft. They warned him to destroy the broom immediately, fearing it was a tool of dark magic. Jacob built a bonfire and threw the broom into the flames. As it burned, the wind howled and the ground shook violently. The runes on the floor inside his house glowed brighter, then faded to ash. He thought the worst was over, but that night a shadowy figure appeared at his door. It was an old woman, dressed in tattered black robes, her eyes burning with fury. "You have destroyed my power," she hissed. "Now you will pay." The woman raised her hand, and Jacob felt an invisible force lift him off the ground. He struggled to breathe as she tightened her grip, her eyes never leaving his. Just as he thought he would die, she vanished, and he fell to the floor, gasping for air. Jacob survived, but he was never the same. The encounter left him with a permanent limp and a haunted look in his eyes. The symbols on his floor faded over time, but the memory of the witch's curse lingered on. He warned others never to meddle with things that they didn't understand, but to tell the witch's broom became a chilling legend in the Amish community, a reminder of the dark forces that lurk in the shadows. The Haunted Quilt. Rebecca Stoltzfus was known throughout the Amish community for her warm heart and kind spirit. One day, while cleaning out her grandmother's attic, she discovered an old quilt, intricately designed with dark, swirling patterns. Her grandmother, who had passed away many years before, was also known for her quilting, but this one felt different, cold to the touch and strangely mesmerizing. Rebecca decided to take the quilt home, thinking it might be a valuable keepsake. After all, heirloom quilts could fetch a high price at the market. That night, as she slept beneath it, she began to dream of a dark forest where shadows moved and whispered secrets. In her dream, she saw a woman in black, her face hidden beneath a hood, stitching the quilt with threads of night. When Rebecca awoke, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She tried to put the quilt away, but each night it seemed to find its way back onto her bed. The dreams continued, growing more and more vivid and terrifying. In them, the woman in black would come closer, her whispers growing louder, until Rebecca could almost understand the words. Desperate, Rebecca sought the help of an elder who revealed the quilt's dark history. It had been made by a witch who had woven her curses and sorrows into the fabric. Her grandmother, when she came into possession of the quilt, had hidden it away. The elder advised Rebecca to destroy the quilt before it consumed her entirely. That night, Rebecca lit a fire in the fireplace and threw the quilt into the flames. As it burned, she heard the witch's voice screaming, filled with rage and pain. The fire roared higher, and the quilt twisted and writhed as if alive. When the flames finally died down, all that remained were ashes. Rebecca thought she was free, but the dreams, they didn't stop. The woman in black continued to haunt her, now appearing outside her window, in mirrors, and in the deepest, darkest shadows of her home. The witch's curse had not been lifted, but transferred. Rebecca lived the rest of her days in fear, her once warm and kind spirit now overshadowed by the darkness that followed her everywhere she went. The Enchanted Mirror. Isaac Farmer was a simple man, content with his life as a blacksmith. One day, while repairing an old barn, he found a beautiful antique mirror hidden inside a rotting wall. It was very ornate, with an intricately carved wooden frame and a glass that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Isaac took the mirror home, hanging it in his workshop. That night, as he worked late, he noticed something strange. The mirror seemed to reflect more than just his workshop. It showed scenes of a dark, foreboding forest and figures moving within the shadows. Curious and a bit unnerved, Isaac watched as one of the figures stepped closer. It was a woman, her face pale and eyes hollow. She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass from the inside. Isaac stumbled back, dropping his tools. The woman in the mirror smiled, a cold and sinister grin. The next morning, Isaac found scratches on the inside of the mirror, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. He covered the mirror with a cloth, hoping to forget what he had seen. But each night, the cloth would be removed, and the woman would appear again, her presence seeming to grow stronger. Isaac sought advice from the village healer, who warned him that the mirror was a portal used by witches to trap souls. The only way to break its power was to shatter the glass and bury the pieces far apart from each other. Gathering his courage, Isaac took a hammer and struck the mirror. It shattered into countless shards, each one reflecting the woman's face, her scream echoing throughout the room. He hurried to bury the pieces, spreading them across the fields and forest. For a while, Isaac felt a sense of relief, but soon strange things began happening around the village. People reported seeing a pale woman wandering the fields at night, her eyes hollow and searching. Crops withered and animals disappeared. It was as if something was draining the very life from the land itself. Isaac realized too late that shattering the mirror had released the witch's spirit. She was no longer confined, but free to roam. He spent his remaining days trying to contain the darkness he had unleashed, but the village would never be the same. The tale of the enchanted mirror became a warning in the Amish community, a lesson in the dangers of meddling with forces beyond human understanding. The Bewitched Mill. Hezekiah Zook owned the only grist mill in the valley, a place where the Amish community gathered to grind their grain. One summer, a mysterious visitor arrived, a woman with piercing blue eyes and an aura of otherworldly power. She asked Hezekiah to grind a particular dark grain, but he refused, sensing it was something sinister. That night, though, the mill came alive. The wheels turned on their own, and the grinding stones spun wildly. Hezekiah rushed to the mill, only to find the woman standing in the center, her eyes glowing in the dark. She chanted in an unknown tongue, and the mill's machinery groaned as if in pain. "I will grind my grain, or you will face my wrath," she warned. Defiant, Hezekiah tried to drive her away, but she vanished, leaving a chilling laugh behind. The next day, his millstones were cracked and all the grain spoiled. The Amish community was in an uproar, their food supply threatened. Desperate, Hezekiah sought help from the bishop, who advised him to cleanse the mill with prayers. They gathered the community, and together they prayed and blessed the mill. The machinery shuddered and the building creaked, but finally the curse was lifted. However, Hezekiah knew the witch would return. He fortified the mill with symbols of protection and kept watch every night. Though the mill was saved, the shadow of the witch lingered, a reminder of the thin veil between the natural and the supernatural. The Possessed Plow. Amos Lapp was a hard-working farmer, dedicated to his land. One spring, he found an old rusted plow buried in his field. It looked ancient and had strange symbols etched into the metal. Deciding to restore it, Amos spent days cleaning and sharpening the blade. And from the moment he used the plow, his crops grew exceptionally well. But Amos began to notice odd occurrences. Sometimes it seemed the plow would move on its own, leaving behind strange patterns carved into the soil. One night, he heard whispers in his fields, growing louder and more insistent. Another evening, he saw a figure standing by the plow, a woman with long tangled hair and eyes burning like coals. "You have awakened my power," she said. "Now you must pay the price." The next morning, Amos found his crops withered and blackened, as if touched by a great fire. He tried to abandon the plow, but it somehow always found its way back to his fields. The whispers grew louder, and the figure appeared more frequently, her demands more urgent. In desperation, Amos sought the wisdom of an old herbalist, who told him the plow was cursed by a witch long ago. In order to break the curse, he had to bury the plow at a crossroads and plant a circle of protective herbs. Following the instructions, Amos buried the plow under the light of the full moon. As he planted the herbs, the ground itself trembled, and the witch's scream echoed through the night. When the last herb was planted, the earth stilled, and the whispers ceased. Eventually, Amos's crops recovered, but he never forgot the terror of the possessed plow. His tale spread throughout the Amish community, a warning to those who might uncover relics of the past best left buried. The Enchanted Butter Churn. Ruth Baylor was known for her butter, which was said to be the creamiest and most delicious in Lancaster County. One day, she received a gift from a distant relative, a beautifully carved butter churn adorned with intricate designs. Thrilled, Ruth immediately put it to use. From the first churn, the butter was extraordinary. But then, strange things began to happen. The churn would move on its own, and often Ruth found it filled with butter, even when she hadn't used it. Neighbors who tasted the butter claimed it brought vivid dreams, some delightful, but some terrifying. One night, Ruth awoke to find the churn glowing faintly in the corner. She approached it cautiously, and as she touched it, a cold voice spoke. "You have accepted my gift," it said. "Now you must share in my power." The next day, Ruth's hands were covered in strange markings, and she felt an unnatural energy coursing through her. The butter sold faster than ever, but the dreams, they grew darker. People reported seeing a shadowy figure in their dreams, a woman with eyes of fire, demanding their loyalty. Fearing she'd unleashed something evil, Ruth sought the counsel of the wisest elder. He revealed that the churn was indeed a tool of an ancient witch designed to bind souls to her will. To break the curse, Ruth had to destroy the churn with fire and scatter the ashes at the 4 points of the compass. So, with a heavy heart, Ruth burned the churn, feeling the witch's anger as the flames consumed it. She scattered the ashes, and the markings on her hands faded. The butter returned to normal, but Ruth never churned butter again, haunted by the memory of the witch's power. The Witch's Lantern. Levi Hostetler was a skilled craftsman, known among the Amish for his beautiful lanterns. One autumn evening, a stranger visited a shop, asking for a lantern that could light the darkest night. The stranger handed Levi a peculiar crystal, cold and dark, and asked him to affix it to a lantern. The stranger paid handsomely, so Levi set about completing the lantern. That night, Levi lit the lantern out of curiosity. The light it cast was eerie, illuminating shadows that seemed to move and whisper. Suddenly, the lantern flickered and a woman's face appeared in the globe, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You have created a portal," she said, her voice echoing in his small shop. "Now, you must help me return." The next morning, Levi discovered the lantern was missing and strange occurrences had plagued the village. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and people reported seeing the apparition of the sorrowful woman in their homes. The crops began to fail, and livestock grew sickly. Levi realized the stranger was a witch, and the lantern he had made was a conduit for her spirit. He sought help from the community's healer, who told him to find the witch's grave and return the crystal to its rightful place. Levi ventured into the dark woods, following the whispers to an old, overgrown grave. He placed the crystal on the grave, and the very ground seemed to tremble. The woman's spirit appeared, her face now peaceful, and she whispered her thanks before fading away. The lantern lost its eerie glow, and the village slowly returned to normal. Levi never spoke of the incident, but the tale of the witch's lantern became a legend among the Amish community, a reminder of the dangers of crafting with unknown materials. The Devil's Book. Samuel Stoltzfus was a pious man, devoted to his Amish faith and his family. One day, while repairing the roof of the old meeting house, he discovered a hidden compartment containing a dusty ancient book. The cover was adorned with strange symbols, and the pages were filled with writings in an unknown language. Curiosity got the better of him, and Samuel took the book home. That night, he decided to try to read it by candlelight. As he opened the book, a chill filled the room, and the candle flickered violently. The words seemed to move on the page, and Samuel felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Suddenly, the candle went out and the room plunged into darkness. Samuel heard a voice, deep and menacing. "You have opened the devil's book," it said. "Now you will serve me." The next morning, Samuel found strange symbols burned into the floor around his bed. The book was gone, but its curse remained. He was plagued by nightmares and strange visions, and his once strong faith began to waver. Desperate, Samuel sought the help of the bishop, who recognized the symbols as those of dark magic. They gathered the community to pray and cleanse Samuel's home. As they prayed, the symbols glowed and then vanished, but the sense of dread lingered. Samuel was never the same. He lived in constant fear, knowing the devil's book was out there somewhere. The tale of the cursed book spread amongst the Amish, a warning to those who might be tempted by forbidden knowledge. The Witch's Well. Anna Fisher was an Amish woman known for her generosity and kindness. One summer, during a severe drought, she discovered an old stone well hidden in the woods near her farm. The well was dry, but Anna decided to clean it out, hoping to find water for her and her neighbors' thirsty crops. As she cleared the debris, she found a small silver amulet at the bottom. It was beautifully crafted, with a strange symbol etched into it. That night, she decided to wear the amulet, hoping it might bring her good luck. However, from that moment, the well did indeed fill with water, and Anna's crops flourished. But strange things began to happen. The water had a peculiar taste, and those who drank it reported vivid dreams and strange visions. Anna herself began to have unsettling dreams of a woman in black who whispered secrets and promises. One night, the woman appeared in the well, her eyes glowing in the moonlight. "You have taken what is rightfully mine," she said. "Return the amulet, or suffer the consequences." Terrified, Anna sought the advice of the village elder, who told her the well belonged to a witch who had cursed it long ago. The amulet was the source of her power, and by taking it, Anna had awakened the witch's wrath. To break the curse, Anna had to return the amulet to the well with a circle of salt and prayers. She gathered the community, and together they performed the ritual. As the amulet sank into the well, the water bubbled and hissed, then turned pure and clear. The witch's presence faded, and the well became a source of life for the village. But Anna never forgot the terror of the witch's curse. The tale of the witch's well became a legend among the Amish, a reminder of the hidden dangers that sometimes lurk in the most unexpected places. Well, friends, the tales you have just heard are more than just mere stories and legends. They are warnings, reminders of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. In the Amish community, where faith and simplicity reign, these encounters with witchcraft and dark forces serve as sobering lessons. They remind us of the power of the unseen and the importance of respecting forces beyond our understanding. As you leave these tales behind and lay down to sleep, remember the shadows that linger in the corners of our world and the ancient wisdom that cautions us to tread carefully. The night holds secrets, and sometimes it is best to let them be.